Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays I do my Q&A sessions where you get to ask me whatever questions you have about comics, collecting, whatever. And I give your channel a shout out if you have a channel. So if you want to ask me a question, you can put it in the comments below. But this week I have 4 questions. It's a bit of a smaller video than I normally do for these Q&A videos. Sometimes I get lots of questions, sometimes I get a few questions. Well, this week I only got 4 questions. So I'm going to start with the question from Lance Jamel. And he wrote, I have a question. It's about Dr. Occult, the Superman prototype. When did the character start, and what are the key comics, More Fun, New Fun Comics, National Comics, Centaur Publications, Comics Magazine are all players? It's been hard to get info. Thanks. Okay, so I did some research because I wasn't super familiar with this character. I knew a little bit about this character because this character appears in Justice League Dark. But I figured, hey, I'll do a deep dive and learn about this character. Now, the character was originally created in October 10th, 1935, and making him a fairly old character, older than Superman. And it was a character that was from the Platinum Age. So that's one of the earliest ages for comics. And he was originally made as a first appearance in New Fun Comics number 6. And the interesting thing about it is he was created by Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel, who are the ones that created Superman. The funny thing is also, in that New Fun Comics number 6, they both, that's their first work in comics. So Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster, it's his first artwork that appears in that comic, and it's Jerry Siegel's first written work that appears in that comic. So it's kind of a major key book. It is an incredibly rare book too. So New Fun Comics, there is none, 0 on the census. That's how rare it is. It is one of those ultra scarce books, and there's not much information about it as a result, except for the fact that they were the creators of it. And also the other thing that's interesting about it is it's also the first appearance of a vampire in comics. So it's a comic that had the very first vampire. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about Dr. Occult. So in the comic, his origin is that he was born with a sister in December 31st, 1899. And he was kidnapped along with his sister. Or I believe they were both, actually I think they were not brother and sister, but they were 2 kids kidnapped. And they were kidnapped by this satanic cult who basically wanted to take these 2 kids and sacrifice them to Satan and, get powers and stuff like that. Instead, they summoned a demon named Koth. Okay, and Koth was wasn't really happy with this sacrifice and killed all the cultists and left these 2 babies. And the babies got rescued by Zator, who was part of this mythic cult called the Seven. And they basically took these kids to this weird citadel for protection, and they basically raised them. And they noticed very early on that the kids both possessed mystic powers, I should say. So they raised them, and when they became old enough to have good control over their mystic powers, they said, hey, here is the symbol of the 7. And they gave them a special symbol. amulet, and they basically sent them on their way. They said, "You are now ready to go out into the world and protect mankind from evil." And they renamed Doctor. They renamed him instead of Doctor. They renamed him Doctor Occult. His name was originally Richard Occult, and his sister, the girl, her name was Rose Psychic, and they became sort of partners. Like she was kind of his assistant. So they went off. They went on a boat ride to China, and then from China to the United States, and they arrived in New York. And basically, this is during the 1920s, and then that's their sort of origin story, how they got to New York, and they started fighting crimes, and he became known as the Ghost Detective, and he used his magic and so forth to kind of fight, solve crimes and fight against the paranormal. Also, what was interesting, as I said, the cult, the seven, this mystic cult, they basically gave him the title of doctor. But then when he went to New York, he actually went to university and studied science and became an actual doctor. So I thought that was kind of interesting in the comics that they kind of have that little origin story. Now, the key books for this character, Dr. Occult, are, as I said, New Fun Comics number 6, More Fun Comics number 14, and number 21, which kind of have early Dr. Occult stories in them. And another book, which is this one, that I actually have. So I didn't have any of the others because they're really rare, and I don't have them. But I do have this one. This is Swamp Thing number 49. And basically, in this, it's like the cameo of Justice League Dark. And one of the members of Justice League Dark is Dr. Occult. So I thought that was kind of cool. And so I just happened to have one of his key books. And those are pretty much all of his major key books. What you would probably do if you were trying to collect this character would be to try to find other appearances. It's really hard to get that information because really there's kind of him in the Golden Age and then there's him in the Modern Age. The Modern Age ones are pretty easy, but the Golden Age ones, it's hard to get information about. And I try to do my best to find some information, but that's all I could really find in terms of information about the character. As I said, most of these books, like if you look at More Fun 14, the New Fun Comics number 6 and 21, they're all super rare books. Like really low survival rate for these books. These are all early Golden Age or Platinum Age books, so very rare. So I hope that's been interesting. I hope that answered your question. I tried to do my best to give as much information on it as possible. Okay, the next question is from Black Boxed Silver and Bronze. You often mention that you always negotiate prices for comics. Could you elaborate on how you do it? So basically he's asking me about how I always brag, like I brag too much, that I get really good pricing on a lot of the comics. And I do try to negotiate and get the best prices I can for any of the comics that I buy. And sometimes I overpay, sometimes I get really good deals. And one of the things that I decided to do was to make a whole video explaining how I negotiate and some of the tactics that I use when negotiating. And I'm going to air that tomorrow. But to give you just a sort of a teaser, I guess, for tomorrow's video, I will say that I kind of came up with this kind of philosophy, if that makes sense, about how to negotiate it, anything, actually, how to negotiate and get the best prices. And I call it the 3 Ps. And I kind of modeled it after looking into real estate, and like I do a lot of marketing for real estate agents. So in real estate, they always talk about the 3 L's being location, location, location. Well, in my 3 P's of negotiating, I talk about price, price, price. And I get into all the details on how to, use that knowledge to really get the best price for the comics and to negotiate well. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. And yeah, I don't want to give too much spoilers because then you won't watch the video tomorrow. So that's planned for that one. The next question comes from Mr. Muggs. I really enjoyed your background story. He wrote, that's what last week's video was about, and you can check that out. I thought I was the only kid that would try to be a price cautious when growing up too. To this day, I still don't get a drink when ordering in restaurants, which oddly turned out to be a great health benefit. Yes, don't drink pop. Or soda if you're American. It's one of the worst things you can do to yourself. I love your videos and curious to know if you follow anyone else from Canada. Most of us are in the US. So I actually follow 3 channels on YouTube, and pretty religiously, actually. I like watching their videos. They all have great channels. So I'm going to give a shout out to 3 Canadian channels. The first is Newbie Comics. And Newbie Comics is, he's local, actually. He's in Ontario. And he puts out a lot of videos, like kind of talking about the hot books of the month and stuff like that. And he brings a bunch of people onto his channel and they discuss it. They have like these panel discussions on the hot comics. Very good, very informative channel. You can learn what's going on, what's hot right now. More dealing with the modern comics than the older stuff. Another channel that I watch is Team CGC 9.8, and he kind of focuses on that 9.8 grade. And so he's looking at more modern as well, sort of maybe Bronze Age to modern, because like there's not really that many 9.8s before the Bronze Age. It's really rare to get those, but he's looking at more books that you can buy as an investment, and he sees that 9.8 grade as an investment grade. So he really looks at modern books in that high grade and which books to sort of pick up. Often I'll watch his channel and buy like raw copies because they're way cheaper, and I'm more interested in some cool books. And sometimes he'll mention some really cool books. He has a tendency of focusing on, he likes Ninja Turtles a lot, and he likes a lot of these modern books, and I find it kind of interesting. The last channel that I watch is Comic Doctor. And I don't want to chiz as much as some of the other channels, but Comic Doctor is another great channel. Basically what he does is one of his jobs, I guess, I'm not sure if it's his full-time job, but maybe it is, he does pressing and cleaning for collectors, and then he'll send them off. He'll do all the submissions as well to CGC. So he'll clean and press all the comics and then send them off to CGC. I was actually debating about giving him some of my books and then getting them cleaned and pressed and sent off to CGC. The cost is a bit high, not to complain about him, but but it is expensive, which makes sense. I mean, it's really expensive even if you try to do it yourself, and he does offer a really great service. His videos are kind of interesting because what happens is he sends the books off to CGC, and then he receives the books back, and he does sort of like unboxings of these CGC books that he's getting back. And it's kind of interesting to see his clients' books, and some of them are pretty awesome books. So that's always fun to watch. So those are the 3 channels: Newbies Comics, Team CGC 9.8, and Comic Doctor that I watch from Canada. Those are all Canadian. Go Canada. Okay. The last question. So it's a very short video today. I'm used to doing these like Q&A videos, and it's like an hour and a half long. So this is a short one for you guys. Is from Rocket Fighter 8. And basically he asked, what is your comic book collecting history? Okay, so in last week's video, I kind of gave a little bit of my personal history in terms of like how my life was. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of my comic collecting history. So when I was 7 years old, on my birthday, I kind of wanted like some cool toy. I really wanted like a cool toy. Like I just wanted, it's your birthday, you kind of want some cool toy. And instead, my parents got me a 1967 uncirculated coin set. Okay. And normally a child at age 7 would be kind of disappointed by that. But actually, I was super excited by it. I didn't realize how much instant love I had for coins because it was a really cool set. It was like this, 1967 for Canada is our centennial. So this was the centennial coin set. And when they did the centennial coins, they actually created like different animals on each coin. So the penny had like a little bird. The 5 cent had what was on the 5 cent? Like not a beaver. Okay, so it's a fish on the 10 cent, and it's like a wolf on the on the quarter. It's like all the different animals, and there was a loon on the $1. So it was kind of cool. Like it was a cool set with all these animals. Actually, was it the 50-cent piece that had the? Now I'm forgetting which animals were on which coin. That's really sad. I'm trying to remember. I have to think about it. Oh, it's a rabbit on the 5 cent. Okay, see, I'm remembering. It's been a while since I've looked at it. It's a rabbit on the 5 cent. Fish on the 10 cent. And yeah, so they're all different animals. That's the main point. And the 50-cent piece had like a wolf howling. So, and the quarter was like a cat, like a bobcat or something like that. Or cougar. I don't know. But the cool thing was, it was just like, it was kind of these cool animals on these coins. And they were like, some of them were silver. And at the time, I thought silver was like this super precious metal, like, like Indiana Jones kind of level of like, rare thing that you'd go off and have an adventure to get silver coins. So I thought, wow, silver, wow, that's really valuable. So, and the coin was quite big. The loonie, not the loonie, it wasn't called the loonie at the time, but it was, it was a Canadian goose, actually. The dollar was a fairly big coin. I was like, wow, I'm rich. I got this big silver coin. And the 50-cent piece and the quarter and the dime were all silver. So I thought, wow, this is really cool. So I was super excited by it. And that got me into coin collecting. And I, during like my childhood, every Christmas we would get like, comics in like our stockings. So my parents would always, give us like, those, they were like the 3 packs of comics, like with Scrooge, Donald Duck, and like different Disney characters in like a little like 3-pack bags. We'd each get one of those. So after a while, we'd get all these comics. So the thing was, that was like, I always saw comics as just fun things to read and kind of mangle. Like we didn't really take care of them. I just really enjoyed reading them. But my coin collecting really got me into the idea of taking really good care of things. Like, you had to be sort of, you put them in their little sets, and you really take care of your coins, and you don't want to you have to hold them a certain way not to rub the coins and all this kind of stuff. So I really got into the idea of taking better care of my things. And even with the comics, I started being a little bit more careful when I read them because of that comic experience, and not comic experience, coin experience. And my first entry into comic collecting was when I went to a coin store that just happened to have Howard the Duck on the wall. And, that really got me into, wow, this is a really cool comic. And it's in a coin shop. It must be a collectible like coins are. And then I started thinking, oh, like maybe it'd be kind of cool to collect comics. And, I really didn't get many comics when I was a kid, but because I would just have the ones that my parents got. But I would collect Mad Magazine. I really was into collecting Mad Magazine. And I would collect other books. I was into collecting like older books as well. And then when I got to university, then I really went wild because I didn't have my parents watching over me, because my parents really didn't let me read comics that were not Disney related comics. So once I got to university, I could buy whatever I wanted. And I had some really cool experiences where there was this one shop, and it was kind of weird because it was one guy that had this massive collection, and he had this big warehouse where he would store all his collection. And during the 90s, comic shops were kind of springing up all over the place. Comic shops were really hot. And this guy, he decided to set up a comic shop, and he basically, I kind of kept on asking about comics and to the guys that worked at the store. And one of the guys was kind of like, oh, we had, because he saw the warehouse. He saw some of these older books that were in the warehouse. And he was like, oh, we sometimes get some of these kind of weird books that nobody really likes, but, and I was like, hey, I might be interested. I might like to see these kind of books that nobody else would be interested in. And what he had was a lot of these Warren Publishing books. He had like Vampirella, Creepy, Eerie, Famous Monsters. So all this kind of stuff like that. And I was like, oh, they're kind of cool. But they were magazines, and magazines weren't cool. Comics were cool. So I was collecting comics. I would buy all the 90s comics and get into all the hype just like everybody else. I always had a little bit of, with the 90s, I was always very influenced by the bad girl comics. I liked good girl comic covers, so back then I liked bad girl comic covers. So I liked Lady Death, Lady Rawhide, Vampirella, and all these kind of things. And I thought they were the coolest things, like sexy women on covers. How awesome. I got to get them. That was like such a contrast from the Disney stuff that I grew up on. So I really gravitated to them. But I still actually collected some kind of Disney-like elements. Like I would still collect Bone. I got the first issues of Bone, like when they came out, like first prints. So I have like a complete run of Bone, all first print. And that was my Disney homage, I guess. But this guy, as I said, he was kind of introduced. He said, if you like Vampirella, you might like some of these old magazines. And I actually got to go to the warehouse, and he was showing me all these long boxes filled with magazines. And I was like, oh, these are really cool. How much do you want for them? And he was like, oh, they're kind of worthless. And he was like selling me them like $2-3 was an expensive one. So, that kind of range and I was just buying the complete runs. So I bought complete runs of Eerie, Creepy, Famous Monsters, Vampirella, 1984, all the comics, all the magazine comics that Warren had published. They didn't have everything. They had a lot of gaps. But then I started, I learned that you could buy stuff from mail order from Mile High Comics. So this is during the early 90s. I started ordering stuff from Mile High Comics, and I'd get their little beaver flyers at the end. They would send me magazines. They would always send me this like flyer thing, and it would have all the books that they would sell. And at the time, there was really not much information about what books to really chase after. So we had the Wizard Guide. That was about it, and Overstreet Guide. those were the two kind of big sources that you would use to try to figure out what comics to chase after. Because I was always interested. My big thing was I always loved the idea of getting that first appearance. That was a big thing for me, and I still have that in my personality. I like to get the first appearance of some character that I like from whatever show or movie, and that's kind of my personality. So yeah, so I ended up buying a lot of the stuff from this guy's warehouse. A couple comic shops closed during the mid 90s because the boom went to a bust, and so I was buying like whole bunch of comics where people are just selling. Like I bought like a whole bunch of Bronze Age like Ghost and all these kind of House of Mystery and all this kind of stuff, like a short box for $10. Like they're just like comics had become worthless overnight when the bust happened, and literally comic shops were going out of business. So that was kind of the 90s. Then I met my wife at the end of the 90s, like 96, and she had to go back to Korea. So basically, I had to take a hiatus from collecting comics, but I still collected while I was in Korea. I collected stuff from eBay. eBay had just come out. And at the time, it was so annoying buying from eBay. This was back in the day where you had to like send money orders. It was like the most painful thing. And sending a money order from Korea was insanely difficult. So it was intense. But I would buy comics from eBay, and I'd make sort of friendships with different people abroad. And I all of a sudden was getting a lot of foreign comics, foreign issues of Warren. And, it was like I was collecting so many things. And I didn't just collect comics related to Warren. I collected their posters. I collected their different models. Like, I always show this one. This one I love. And I have even their like heads that they would have, like these Dawn Post rubber heads that they would made. And, I have so many collectibles from the Warren collection. And I would get them all sent to Canada. I would because it didn't make sense to bring them to Korea. So I just send them over to my parents' house in Canada. And they were freaking out. They hated me. They hated me for doing that, because like every time they'd get these packages, just all these packages. And they didn't really like getting all these packages, because sometimes they would have to pay customs on it, and they really didn't like it. So they would just dump them in my bedroom, my childhood bedroom, when I was, in their house. So when I returned much later, it was like this huge, it's insane. It was like dozens of boxes filled with like various items that I'd ordered. And I thought it was really fun. I thought it was really cool. And then when I came back, finally for, to stay here, I moved to Toronto, and that was in 2000. And I was dirt poor. I was just starting my business. I had no money. I really wasn't buying anything. I just couldn't afford it. And then, I have kids, and there was a period where I'd buy maybe a few books each year, and I wouldn't buy like the ones that would constantly come out. So probably from 2000 all the way up to 2015 or even later, I really didn't buy many comics. Like a few, maybe a dozen a year, if that. And I'd only buy keys, like sort of semi keys, like the first Miles Morales or something like that kind of key book that was a modern book. And I'd buy Warren related comics or magazines, I should say. So I'd still get those every year. I get a lot of those each year. But then once I got into I lived in this really big house, like 8,000 square feet, another 4,000 square feet in the basement that we didn't finish yet. It was this massive house that we lived in. It was just a monster house. I kind of, through my business, I kept on buying bigger and bigger houses. It was kind of weird. And then when we sold that house, I was debt free. And I was like so used to spending so much money on my mortgage, on having like people like maintain, like I had a nanny, I had all this kind of extra costs when I was living in that house, and all of a sudden all that money was freed up. So I kind of went a little crazy after that, buying comics. I kind of poured all that money that I was saving into buying comics. So for the last 3, 4 years, I've been buying crazy amounts of comics, and just having fun and just playing with money a bit. So that's really been my history. When I first started buying comics again, I was like, I'm going to get every key. I'm gonna add this kind of, I made this crazy want list, this really long want list. It was like Fantastic Four #1, Fantastic Four #2, all the Fantastic Fours, X-Men #1. And I just put a big long list of all the books that I ever wanted to get, but never had the funds to get. And I kind of went crazy with that. So it was just, it was a really fun experience, just having that money to play with. And I kind of overspent, actually. I spent more than what I should have, and kind of built up a bit of a debt. But I'll pay it off. It's one of those things. So it's been a journey, buying and just buying all these comics. But I still have this crazy want list. It just never seems to get shorter. If anything, it gets longer. It's one of those things. Even though I got so many of the books that I dreamt about as a kid, getting X-Men #1, getting Wonder Woman #1, and all these kind of books was kind of a dream come true for me in terms of my comic collecting. And yeah, it's been very interesting. So I hope that you enjoy my little journey, and I hope that you continue to watch my videos. And please like, comment, and subscribe, and ask me your questions. What questions do you have for me about comics? You can ask me stuff that I have to research. You can ask me stuff about whatever. I don't care. I'm a pretty open book. So thanks again for watching. Bye for now.